If you compare all our sufferings in 68, 69, until maybe 5 years, or until 2 years ago, as bad as it is, it's in no way comparable to what it is now.
This was Professor Asad Abdul Rahman. He lives in a world shaped by the rise and fall of empires, where few conflicts remain as deeply embedded in the human psyche as the Palestinian struggle. To really grasp its full weight, one must enter the life of someone who has lived its relentless cycle of displacement, resistance and hope. Today we are getting a glimpse into the life of Abdul Rahman, a man whose very name has traversed the whole spectrum of labels, from so-called terrorists to freedom fighter, respected academic to intellectual leader. But beyond the simplistic binaries that Western narratives often impose, Abdul Rahman's journey is a testament to resilience, intellect and an unwavering dedication to his people's cause. Abdul Rahman was not born into a life of comfort and privilege. He was born in 1944 as the shadow of colonialism and the formation of Israel brutally displaced 750,000 Palestinians, inclusive his own family. Imagine for a moment being born in a refugee camp, knowing only the dust of exile as your playground, while the world moves forward in comfort and convenience. Your family, being driven from the land, are being told they no longer belong, and yet the echoes of their heritage and identity are too strong to be silenced. This is a story of origin of a man who refuses to bow to the forces that thought to erase him. Abdul Rahman's early involvement in the Palestinian struggle was almost inevitable. To some, his resistance marked him as a radical, even as a terrorist, a label all too conveniently slapped on freedom fighters by the very powers perpetuating the oppression. But as history often shows, the lines between terrorist and freedom fighter are written by those in power. What does it really mean to resist an occupier? That's a question the West rarely asks. Instead, we soothe our conscience with narratives that absolve imperial powers of any responsibility. Yet Abdul Rahman's story didn't stop at resistance. Over the decades, he transformed from a man of the frontline struggle to a thinker, a diplomat and a scholar. He earned a PhD in political science, rising to become a leading figure in the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, and the voice of reason and strategy during the Oslo Accords. But his own critique of the Oslo Accords reflected his understanding of Western betrayal. While the Accords promised peace, they delivered only a facade of progress. For Abdul Rahman, this was a bitter pill, an agreement that, in his view, allowed the West to wash its hands in innocence, while the reality of occupation and dispossession continued for his people unabated. In today's conversation, we challenge you to step out of your zone of comfort. Imagine just for a moment being born not into a rich Western country, but into the dystopian reality of a refugee camp. Violence, hunger, cold, heat, illness, your history denied, your identity reduced to a number on a camp registry, your people brutally oppressed and your leaders and sometimes your people killed. What would you do? Would you rise up and fight with everything you have? Would you defy an oppressor that sees your existence as nothing more than a problem to be crushed or at best managed? How would you cope when your very right to exist is virtually under attack? Abdul Rahman's life in many ways mirrors the broader Palestinian struggle, a story of resistance, intellectual transformation and a critical challenge to the Western narratives. It is a story that commands our attention, empathy and most importantly, our willingness to question the structures of power that sustain this circle of suffering. The interview concludes with a fascinating tour in which Asad Abdul Rahman introduces us to a distinguished array of presidents, kings, diplomats and even the Pope, figures whose lives have intersected with his at various points in history. For our listeners on platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcast, we have retained this segment in the audio format as well. Even without the visual component, you will understand its significance as you listen. Professor Abdul Rahman, what a pleasure having you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Before we start, I'm here now almost 10 days and you have kindly granted me a glimpse into your world. Not only your private world with your family, but also in your, how shall I say this, professional world. I've seen you speak with a number of very prominent speakers. I've seen how people revere you. I cannot use another word. So you're very well established here in Amman. I've interviewed a number of other diplomats. They all speak very highly of you.
Thank you.
And yeah, it was a really extraordinary experience these last days.
I'm glad.
I have a couple of points in front of me which I would like to list for the purpose, for the benefit of our viewer.
Okay.
Right? You were, and please correct me if I'm wrong. So you were co-founder of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. We will come back to that organization because there was a critical incident. You are, I think, also co-founder of the Palestinian National Council.
Not co-founder, but one of founders.
Okay. Then you are in the PLO Executive Committee and Refugees Affairs.
I was.
You were, okay. Then there is the Higher Council for Refugee Camps.
Yes.
Okay. Then you're Director General of the Abu Hamid Shoma Foundation.
Yes.
Okay, so far so good. Then there is the Palestinian Academic Society for the Study of International Affairs.
Yes.
Okay. Do you ever sleep? Then we have the Educational and Academic Influence. Yeah. And last but not least, you are a vocal critic of US, UK, and the Western policies in the Middle East. Okay. And then I have a couple of academic achievements, because you completed your PhD at the university in Calgary in 1973, and you focused on the military bureaucracy, politics, and society in Egypt,
Yes.
specifically into the era of Nasser.
Exactly.
Yeah. Why?
Because Nasser is one of the leaders that modern Arab history cherishes, and there has been no other leader up till now even. So at that time he was very much loved, recognized, etc. And that's why I wanted to focus on his experience, which turned to be, because I concentrated on the internal nation building, if you want to call it that way, it wasn't really a very nice, positive picture.
There are a couple of other academic achievements on my list here. Assistant researcher at the Palestine Research Center in Beirut. This was 1966, 1967. Then head of research section, Palestine Research Center, 2 years later. Professor, you are actually a professor of political science at the University of Kuwait from 1974 to 1984, 10 years. Okay. And then editor-in-chief from Social Science magazine, also in Kuwait, in a similar period of time. And then founding member, Palestinian Academic Society for the Study of International Affairs. That was in Jerusalem. Interesting, yeah. And I think we mentioned this already, Director General Abu Hamid Shoma Foundation in Amman from 1981 till 1997. So I want to...
Founder and Director General.
Very good. So I'm so specific in regards to what you did in your life, because I will contrast this now with my very first question. Dr. Rahman, are you a terrorist?
Oh my God. What a start. What a question. If believing in international law and adhering to it. And if believing in and adhering to human rights declaration, and if you are a believer in Western ideals, then yes, I'm a terrorist.
I'm asking specifically because up until today, you cannot enter certain Western countries. It's quite a list, actually. It's from the US, I believe, Canada.
Yes, because we do believe, not only in this part of the world, but almost in most of the countries of the world, that there is a great amount of hypocrisy when it comes to principles, ideals, and practices. For example, the Americans talk about, and the Canadians and the Europeans, they talk about human rights. And what have they done for the genocide that is taking place in Gaza now, or the genocide that has been going on in Palestine all through the last few decades? They talk about self-determination. If I do believe in self-determination, I'm immediately labeled as a terrorist. Me and all of the Palestinians and Arabs, for that matter. So this is the problem. The gap, the very large gap between American Western ideals and practices and policies. I've always been, I'm a graduate of American universities and Canadian universities, and I taught in American and Canadian universities, in addition to some Arab universities. The problem is that we love American principles. I adhere to it. Canadian principles, and I adhere to it. Western ideals, and I adhere to it. But I hate and despise and reject their practices, their policies. Again, the gap, the unbridgeable gap up till now between their ideals, principles, and practices. And this is where the major alienation, source of alienation of the peoples of this part of the world and most parts of the world with the American and Western policies.
You're absolutely right. It seems very much that the Human Rights Charter, is only valid for white people. Yeah, when it comes to Arabs.
Not all white people.
Not even
not all white
yeah,
people.
yeah,
Yes,
that's true.
yeah.
That's true. If you look at South America, it's
Yeah.
it's true. It's true. Now, when it comes to the topics of this interview, I had to make really tough choices because there would have been, I anyway have too much, yeah, but there would have been even more. So I took a couple of highlights, but the highlights show your progression from a terrorist to what you are today, basically an academic. You run your own schools, in this trend, yeah. So you told me you were arrested when you were very young. So maybe you give us a little bit of context why you were arrested, how old you were, what the effects of this arrest was, etc.
Yes. Again, when I was a kid, I was 13 years old, and there was the anniversary of the Palestinian Nakba, that's to say the catastrophe. And we as students, elementary and secondary classes, we decided to sort of demonstrate in the streets of Nablus city at the time, West Bank, to draw attention to that date of the Nakba, of the catastrophe. And we were arrested. And then later, I got arrested in Lebanon for a few days, again for the same old reason, which is to just express and practice your right of demonstration, not violent demonstration, ordinary, calm demonstration. But these regimes in the Arab world, they are stooges for the West and the Americans. And again, they talk about right of demonstration, right of self-expression, etc. And when you do that, you are labeled at that time as a communist. Now you're labeled as a terrorist, etc., etc., and they punish you. And this is not the story, my story alone. This is the story of the peoples in this part of the world. Of course, there are differences between one country and the other. To be arrested in one country is different than disappearing in another. So the degrees of repression vary.
But you told me you were almost a year in prison, but that was not in Lebanon. I thought
that was in Israel.
Yeah.
Because after 67, I've just gotten my MA degree from AUB. Well, in fact, I have just finished defending my thesis for master's degree at AUB.
And you said AUB is?
American University of Beirut, which has been there for the last 75 years. One of the oldest and most prestigious universities. We had the 5th of June war, and the whole of Palestine was occupied. The Golan Heights was occupied. Sinai Peninsula was occupied. So we decided in the General Union of Palestinian Students, of which I was the head in Lebanon, and the Arab Confederation for Students in Lebanon, again, of which I was the head, we decided that we want to defend our country against this new occupation, which made me end up in few months in Israeli prisons. I was caught in Old Jerusalem, but
how old were you?
I was 21, 22 years old, and they arrested me and some of my colleagues. You want to call them comrades, friends. That was the case. And I had a tour in 4 Israeli prisons, because in Jerusalem, once I was arrested, I was taken to the Muscovite prison there. And by the way, I was born in the Muscovite hospital, which was an adjacent building, and still is adjacent building of the prison. Muscovite is because it's the whole complex is of Russian origin. And I spent there almost 2 weeks, and then I was taken to the most notorious interrogation prison in Ramla. And then I was taken to Nablus and then to Ramallah, where I had what they call a martial law, a martial court. And there I was luckily sentenced for only 1 year, because I was accused of 3 things, 3 accusations. One is entering Palestine from Jordan with arms. But that was rejected by the Israeli law itself, because there was no proof whatsoever. And the second one, that I was a member of a terrorist, or at that time, sabotaging organization. And the third one is forging an ID, which was proven. So for that, I got only 1 year. Other than that, had any of the other accusations been proven, then I would have spent life sentence. But again, there were hijacking of aeroplanes, there were Israeli soldiers taken as prisoners in the fight, and there were exchanges. So many got freed from Israeli prisons in these exchanges.
We come to the hijackings in a moment, yeah.
Yeah.
But before we do, how did this year in prison affect you? Because you told me self-explanatory, it was not a pretty time, right?
Yes. It was tough, very tough. I mean, I lost in this year 26 kilograms, and at that time I was only 55 kilograms altogether. So you can imagine losing almost half of your weight there. But I must say another fact. The torture I was exposed to, if compared with the torture that my colleagues were exposed to, who were older than me, whose accusation has been proven, etc., or in the process of being, I mean, must have been caught with their arms. So, if compared, my pains, my agony, my torture was almost insignificant in comparison, as bad as it is. And let me add another fact. If you compare all our sufferings in 68, 69, until maybe 5 years, or until 2 years ago, as bad as it is, it's in no way comparable to what it is now. Thanks to Ben Ghafir and Netanyahu's very extremist government. Ben Ghafir, you know, he's a proven terrorist. By Israeli law and American law, he's a terrorist. Now he's a minister, and he's in charge of the prisons, he's in charge of national security, etc. So he made sure in the last year and a half to make of the Israeli prisons real hell, even if compared with our sufferings.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen reports of structural rape within Israeli prisons. We have seen, I think it was on Channel 12 or on Channel 10, a discussion that
Yes.
advocated using rape as a, as a formal means of torture
Yes.
on Palestinian prisoners. It's just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
But talking about terrorists being in government in Israel, yeah, it's not the first time.
Yes.
I mean, if you look back in history, 1948, Irgun Haganah, these were, according to the predecessor of CIA and the British MI5, these were terrorist organizations. This is not what we are saying.
Yes.
Yeah, they attacked British targets.
Yes.
And they produced a number of future prime ministers.
Yes.
So again,
I mean, Shamir was sentenced
I saw his
for
mugshot,
life
actually.
imprisonment. As a matter of fact, I think for life imprisonment as a terrorist himself. And he was denied visa to UK, etc. But then when he became prime minister, things changed.
Just one example. This is the Count Bernadotte
Yes,
was killed.
Count Bernadotte was assassinated.
So Count Bernadotte, for viewers who do not know, rescued about 30,000 Jews in the Second World War.
Yes,
he was the mediator, the UN mediator.
Yes.
And they killed him.
Yes,
Yeah.
regardless.
Also the Irgun, who produced later a prime minister,
Yes.
killed a high official from the UN. This is just to indicate what's happening today has a predecessor in history. In prison, yeah, so outside of the prison, you were a dissident, not a terrorist yet, yeah. But inside of the prison, you were already a symbol of the resistance.
Yes.
So how did you survive in prison, given those two contrary,
Yeah, you see, the way you are seen by your people is different than the way you're seen by the occupiers, your enemies. So in their own eyes, we are terrorists. In the eyes of our people, we are freedom fighter. That gave us really impetus to struggle more and more. Because when your people appreciate what you're doing, and as a matter of fact, when freedom fighter lovers all over the world value and your struggle, again, that gives you additional energy, additional commitment to fighting for the principles again of the West. That's to say, self-determination, the right to have your own state, human rights, etc., etc.
we often idealize freedom fighters.
Yes.
But loyalty has its price. What was the price that you had to pay at that time?
The loyalty, we were supposed to be loyal to regimes that were pro-Western, or they were subjugated.
I meant loyal to the cause.
Okay, sorry. Loyal to the... So could you repeat the question then again?
So freedom fighters are often idealized. What people do not realize that the loyalty of those freedom fighters to their cause, their commitment, has a price.
Yes.
So what was the price that you had to pay?
The price was, number one, that imprisonment in Israel, and before that in other Arab prisons, but it wasn't as long. And the other prices is when they deny you entry, they deny you work. You cannot make a living after being a graduate. When I became a PhD holder from Canada, when I graduated, and I started looking for a job in Arab universities, I couldn't get acceptance here and there until I was lucky to have a push from a friend of mine, from a teacher of mine, as a matter of fact, who had at that time very solid connections with one of the Arab universities, namely the University of Kuwait. So he managed to find me a job there. So everything else, traveling, you cannot travel from one country to the other because you are again labeled as anti-American. In fact, because you are anti-Zionist, anti-Israeli occupation. But they don't say that. They just say you are an extremist. You are a threat to the security of that particular country, while you indeed and in reality are doing nothing to destabilize that country. But again, these countries are not run by their apparent rulers. They are run by the Americans, by the British, depending from one case to the other.
Apologies for this 60-second interruption, but if this conversation has you intrigued, you will want to hear this. Over on my Substack, I share periodic newsletters that give you real, practical tools to cut through media bias, manipulation, propaganda, and deception. It's free, it's raw, and yes, it's sometimes controversial. Each piece breaks down powerful techniques to help you see through the smoke and mirrors that people, politicians, corporations, and the media use to keep you in the dark. If you're ready to pick up a new skill set that can last your lifetime, hit the link in the description and subscribe. One last thing. As you can see on these screenshots, YouTube and Twitter have decided to silence the critical voices that you can find on SolveCube Analytics. The latest trick is to simply unsubscribing people without them even realizing it. That's why I would really appreciate your support in pushing back against this silencing. If you're not already subscribed, now is really the perfect time to do so. Join us to stay informed and amplify critical voices. For those who were already subscribed, check your subscription status and share this content to help us reach others who value independent analysis. It really makes a difference. Thanks.
Now we move on to a more controversial topic. That's the hijacking of airplanes that the PLO quite successfully executed in that period. And I'm interested in a specific hijacking, the hijacking of the El Al machine. I think it was 426 or 264. I'm not sure anymore. In 1968.
Yes, I think so.
Maybe you tell us the story.
Yeah, well, there was a group, let me repeat that. The PFLP, that is the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which was at that time the second largest and effective organization.
And you were a member.
We're talking about 1968, 69, etc., 1970, of which I was one of 9 founders. Some of the wings of that organization, as a matter of fact, to start with, that organization believed in hijacking aeroplanes, not for the sake of hijacking the aeroplane. And they have always been careful not to have anybody hurt. But I mean, there are always collateral damages. And I don't recall that there was any case of killing. Very rare, if there were any. They just wanted to draw the attention of the world to their plight, to their liberation fight, to the roots of the Palestinian suffering, Palestinian problem. So you get the limelight when you do such actions. When you are fighting in your own land, you know that the Western media is totally biased against you, which is controlled in very many instances by the Zionist organization. So nothing is said about your cause, nothing is said about your plight, nothing is said about your struggle, nothing is said about your resistance. So to put yourself on TVs or on the news broadcasting services, to put yourself on the radar, to draw the attention of the peoples of the world, you have to, some believed at that time, you have to dramatize things. You have to do something unusual that the media cannot hide. And that's how they adopted the hijacking of aeroplanes. Of course, later, 2-3 years later, the PFLP leadership said that we have served our purpose, enough with hijacking, no more hijacking. And there was a small splinter group which decided that it wanted to continue with the hijacking, and they were kicked out from the rank and file of the PFLP. But at that time, yes, we all of us in the PLO believed in hijacking aeroplanes, not because we wanted to hijack aeroplanes, only because we wanted to bring to the attention of the world our fight, our plight, our resistance, our suppression.
What was your role?
I was not very active in that because by the time that this policy was adopted, I have already been accepted at one of the Canadian universities, and I traveled to Canada, but I was a friend and a comrade, ex-comrade at the time, because, you know, I left the rank and file of the PLO, of the PFLP, the Popular Front, in March 1970. And in August, I went to Canada. But before I went to Canada, though I was no more a member, I was asked by these comrades who were dear friends at the same time. They asked me at one point to run a press conference in Egypt about the hijacking of the American TWA, which I did. And that was the nail in the coffin of my freedom by the Americans. Yeah. No, I was blacklisted in America even before 1970, before the hijacking thing, simply because we were demonstrating against the American policy which was supporting Israel in May, just before the June War. And being the president of the General Union of Palestinian Students in Lebanon and the Arab Confederation there, I was the leader of these demonstrations. And you know, perhaps the audience wouldn't know that the American embassy was adjacent to AUB campus.
And the university.
Exactly. Yeah. So we were demonstrating in the university, moving all the time towards the embassy. We've thrown stones at the embassy, etc., and nothing more. And ever since then, I was blacklisted in the US up till now. Mm. I mean, from 67 till now, I'm blacklisted. I sometimes, every 5 years, every 10 years, they give me what they call a waiver. And then when I joined the PLO as an independent member, again, that added another label of terrorism. Because the American Congress, which claims to be defending human rights, has taken a decision that any PLO member is a terrorist. And most of the Palestinian people are PLO members one way or the other. And up till now, take for example President Arafat or Abu Mazen now, Mahmoud Abbas. They are labeled as terrorists because they are PLO people. You negotiate with the PLO, you invite them to the White House, they accept to go to Oslo agreements to make peace with Israel, but you're still a terrorist because you are a PLO. And Israel recognized the PLO in the Oslo agreements, but again, you're still a terrorist. I mean, what kind of equation is that? It's one of the most absurd equations ever.
You presented just a perfect segue into my next topic, Oslo. But before we do, because I said I specifically mentioned the El Al hijacking here in Jordan.
Yeah.
What was your role in that specific?
No, I was in Canada at the time.
Okay.
I was in Canada.
I misunderstood.
No, I was in Canada at the time, but the spokesman of the whole revolutionary airport, it was called, in the Jordanian desert. The spokesman was Bassam Abu Sharif, who was my classmate and who was one of the members I recruited for the Arab nationalist movement, which is the mother organization of the PFLP, the Popular Front. So again, I mean, when you are a member in an organization and you leave, even when you leave, your ex-comrades are your best friends. And you see them and you dine with them and you travel with them and you become friends with other factions like Fatah or Popular Front or what have you. But again, we are all PLO, so we are all terrorists.
Same as Hamas today, right? Even if you have not been born before 2006, when the last elections were, right?
Yes.
You're terrorists because apparently you're supporting Hamas.
Yeah.
But you mentioned already Oslo. Now, to my astonishment, when I did my research, I found out how closely associated you were with the Oslo Agreement.
In fact, you see, Oslo is misread, and the PLO acceptance of Oslo is again misread by many up till now. When the PLO Central Council, of which I was a member, took a decision to accept the Oslo secret agreements, trying hard to be peaceful, to engage in peace. There were three positions within the Central Council of the PLO. A very small minority that rejected it totally. And another very small minority that accepted the agreement to the literal letter of the agreement. The majority has taken a position which was conditional. We accept the Oslo Agreement if, as we understand it, would lead us to a Palestinian independent state on only 21.5% of the total land of Palestine. That was the absolute majority. And I was one of those. It's a sort of a conditional acceptance. If that takes us to a small kind of self-determination, if it takes us to a mini Palestinian state, okay, we will support the process and we will commit ourselves to it. But if, as it turned to be from the very first outset, from the very first 2 years or 3 years after that, especially after the assassination of Mr. Ishaq Rabin, the Israeli Prime Minister, after that, we have seen that all the Israeli governments that came in, especially Netanyahu, who has been there for the last 17 years as a prime minister, when they turned against Oslo, when they refused to recognize any Palestinian independence, when they insisted that Jerusalem, Eastern Jerusalem, That's to say 67 Jerusalem, Arab Jerusalem, was incorporated into the body of Israel. When they denied your rights, when they started cutting off the money you're supposed to earn from the taxes that Israel, according to the Paris Agreement, was supposed to collect it to you. I mean, there was nothing left of Oslo. There was nothing left of any endeavor to peace. And up till now, you must have heard Mr. Netanyahu appearing on the UN, and only last week when he made a speech after the assassination of Hezbollah leader, he said bluntly, Abbas and the national authority, Palestinian authority, they are terrorists and we're not going to deal with them. So everybody is a terrorist in the eyes of the present Israeli government. This PA, Palestinian Authority, which is recognized by countries much more in number than the countries that recognize Israel, including the US, Canada, European Union, what have you. They all recognize the PA and they give money to it to support the needs, economic needs of it. But the only party in the world that totally labels this authority as terrorists, let alone Hamas. So, I mean, the most, let me be blunt and not only frank. The Israelis, the whole world would never ever find somebody who was as moderate as President Abbas. And if he's still labeled by Netanyahu and the Israelis as the leader of terrorists, then there is no chance for peace with such mentality, with such attitude. You can't have peace.
There are a multitude of speakers on my channel, from diplomats to academics, who say the same thing. Israel never was ready to give up land for peace.
Yeah.
And we can go back to Ben-Gurion. I mean, I said this many times before. In his letters to his son, he wrote that he accepts the partition, meaning the two-state solution, only as a means to an end. And the end, of course, is the greater Israel.
Yes, but not only that. Now, the Israeli position has been for the last few years with this extremist Netanyahu. Not only his present government, but the two governments before that. This prime minister is not only not willing to give any piece of land, he's out to acquire more Arab lands.
Yeah. And we see this
Arab
now
lands.
at this very moment. Israel
Exactly.
in Lebanon.
All the West Bank is for them. The Gaza is for them. The Golan Heights is for them. Now southern Lebanon their eye is on southern Lebanon right now.
Yeah. And Jordan might be next.
Yes. There are very influential parties in the government who advocate that Jordan is again part of Greater Israel. So not only they don't want to give land, they want to acquire more land, Arab land.
Coming back to the Oslo Accord, so there are voices who say that Oslo was never meant to lead to a Palestinian state. It's just a kind of mechanism or a camouflage to allow to renegade international pressure on Israel while Israel keeps expanding. So I think I heard people say Oslo actually was a trap. Yeah, it was Ehud Barak, it was Clinton, and Arafat was there. But I'm interested specifically, what was your role in the Oslo Accords?
I was never a member of the negotiating team. I didn't know about this secretive negotiation like the 99% of the Palestinian activists. But when it was agreed upon, I was one of the third mainstream, the majority, that made conditional acceptance. Meaning, if that is a must, we used to say, if that is an obligatory corridor, tunnel, that would lead us to partial self-determination, to a Palestinian mini-state on 21 on the smaller Palestine that was occupied in 67, with East Jerusalem, Arab Jerusalem, Palestinian Jerusalem as its capital, we will honor Oslo Agreement. If not, we cannot fall into a trap that would lead us to nothing.
Now, we are sitting here surrounded by images who basically show the who is who in royalty, in politics, yeah. And we will, you kindly agreed, you will lead me around later.
Sure.
We will film that, yeah.
Or,
So, what's the next step from your perspective? So we went through your early years, you went into Oslo. So how did you come, let's say, from Oslo to being an academic?
you see, I think there must be something in my genes, in my DNA. I mean, I'm always wondering whether I want to be 100% in academia or 100% in being a freedom fighter. And I could never rest my mind on one of the two options. That's why I keep moving from one to the other. Like I was in the freedom fighting movement immediately after I got my MA.
Quite a contrast, huh? From
Yes.
academia directly into...
Yes, because you know, Palestinians are made to believe. I mean, from their very first day in their life, they are being oppressed. They are being refugees, like myself. I'm a refugee, Palestinian refugee, a victim of the Nakba in 48. So,
Which village are you from?
pardon?
Which village are you from?
We were, my parents were living in Akka at the time when I was 2 years old.
Where is this now? To give...
Akka is in, between inverted commas, in Israel, next to, between Nazareth and Haifa. And my father, grandfather, and his father were born in a village called Tira, just next to Haifa, which is not too far from Akka. But originally they are all from Deir Ghassane, as a Barghouti family in the West Bank, where they lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. So in that sense, Palestinian refugees and Palestinians who are under occupation, from the very moment they open their eyes, they are born, they are exposed to occupation, to repression, to deprivation, etc., which by nature, by necessity, politicizes them. And when they get politicized, like I was supposed to be a medical doctor. I had a scholarship from UNRWA, United Nations and Relief and Work Agency. But because of I was at AUB then. I had 2 pre-medic years, in fact, 1 pre-medic years, and the first year was preliminary one. I then decided that I don't want to be a medical doctor. I want to go to political science because I want to lead a political life to fight for our cause, the Palestine cause. So I ended up being a university professor year after year, etc. And whenever I'm in this university or that university and I see what's happening to my people, to the Arab nation as a matter of fact, my nationalism comes to the surface again, and then I join politics again.
You mentioned the red flag, you know, I can't avoid coming back to it. Freedom fighter twice now, yeah? Can you tell us a bit more about this period? When was this period? Or were there multiple periods?
Which period?
Freedom fighter. You
Yes.
said between academia and freedom fighter.
Yes.
So when was that? Were there multiple periods of being a freedom fighter?
Yeah.
And what did you do as far as you can tell?
You know, since I was 13 years old, I was co-opted in the Arab nationalist movement, which was before the creation of the PLO. And this Arab nationalist movement called for the liberation of Palestine as an Arab movement, but the backbone of it was made of Palestinians at the time. So ever since I was 13 years old, I joined this organization because it promised me of making things possible for me to be a freedom fighter, to fight for Palestine. And I remained in the Arab nationalist movement until I was 21, 22. And then I participated in establishing the PFLP. I was one, as I mentioned earlier, of 9 founders here in Amman and in the West Bank. And then we decided to cross the river Jordan and infiltrate into Palestine, to cross the river and go to Palestine to start armed struggle against Israel. When I was caught, and then I was deported for 31 years until Oslo came, which allowed me to go back to Palestine.
So in this period of 31 years, where were you? I mean,
I was
in
in
Yeah.
the PLO. I joined the PLO. I was in academia and in politics.
Yeah.
But my politics at the time was to make lectures, to write articles, to write books. So most of the 44 academic articles I wrote and most of the 21 books I wrote are on the Arab-Israeli conflict and on the Palestinian case. So even when I go to academia, I'm again directly connected to the Palestinian cause and to the Arab-Israeli conflict.
I tried one last time, yeah? So if I hear freedom fighter, I think Che Guevara, for example.
You?
If I hear the word freedom fighter, what the picture that immediately comes to my mind is Che Guevara.
Che Guevara, yeah,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Yeah.
But that's not you. That's not what you mean when you were a freedom fighter, right?
Well, if we call it armed struggle,
Yeah.
if we're referring to armed struggle, no, I was one of the creators of the armed struggle of the PFLP. And I was an organizer, a planner, because at that time I was a founder, I was a leader. Leaders do carry arms and they do fight, but not always, because they are spurred to be the people in the background, people who plan, people who raise funds, people who make connections to support the whole cause. But when the need came, we crossed the River Jordan, and 3 of our colleagues got killed because we were caught in an Israeli ambush, and so we had to run and to disappear until I was caught in Jerusalem.
And then you were how long in jail? Was it a year?
Yes.
That was the year. Okay. Then I would say then you were really lucky to get only 1 year, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
There was a
yes.
story, I heard someone talking, there was a story about your lawyer. You had a very specific lawyer who helped you there, right?
Yes, we had, being a student leader, the French Student Union sent a group of French lawyers to defend me and to defend a colleague of mine whose name is Taysir Quba. We were arrested together. But the Israelis refused to allow them. So a group of lawyers, some of them are Palestinians, some of them are Jews, but all are Israeli Arabs and Israeli Jews, who were lawyers and came as a delegation and defended my case, led by the well-known Palestinian Israeli lawyer, Mr. Hanna Naqara, and the famous Jewish lawyer, Felicia Langer. So Felicia Langer was the actual lawyer who carried on and proceeded with my case. And when she wrote her book, بأم عين, that's to say from Hebrew to Arabic and to English, with what I have seen with my own eyes, she devoted 1 chapter about my case and about me. So, I mean, yes, there was that time, when there was an Israeli left, solid Israeli liberals who believed in human rights, who believed who didn't believe in their own occupation, and they didn't deny the right of the Palestinians, peaceful Palestinians who want to make peace. But now we don't have them. They are all fanatics. Look at the statistics. Look at the polls, most recent polls in Israel. They are carried away by this extreme ultra-nationalist or ultra-messianic ideas, ideologies, etc. And they are, in a way, I believe, committing suicide. Because when you are that extremist, when you see nothing but yourself, when you deny others their livelihood, when you deny them their rights, their freedom, etc., and you suppress them. I mean, look at this, what Ben Ghafir said, and his colleague Smotrich. You have 3 options, you Palestinians. That is publicly said. You have 3 options. Either you accept and you subjugate to our occupation and be our slaves, or you are deported voluntarily or by force, or you're going to be killed. So choose one of the three options, either a slave or
Ethnically cleansed,
or dead. And there are so many quotes in the Israeli Zionist literature which tantamount always to the slogan of a good Palestinian is a dead Palestinian, a good Arab is a dead Arab.
That comes from the Native Americans, right?
Yes, yes.
So one...
Americans and Australians and, you know, I mean, and in Canada. I mean, this is how it all started.
So given the fact that, you know, the powers that support Israel today are basically based on genocide themselves.
Yes.
It's no surprise that they tolerate, if not instigate, for geopolitical reasons, what Israel does on America's behalf, to a lesser extent to the West's behalf in the Middle East.
Yes, I mean, that's part of it and the most dominating part, yes. But now, with the new world we live in, with the mass media, with everybody being himself is a journalist through his mobile phone, with getting rid of the major mass media, TVs, broadcasting services, magazines that are dominated by the Zionist lobby. Once that has changed, we have seen the demonstrations all over the world, supporting Palestine, supporting the Palestinians, and being anti-Israeli occupation. I mean, nobody could imagine that the U.S. streets would be full with so many demonstrators calling for the self-determination of the Palestinian people. I mean, a year ago, there was no demonstration whatsoever, but all through the year, the same in Europe.
London,
Brussels, Stockholm, Berlin, all over. So this new awakening on the international level gives us lots of hope and pays off for our sufferings.
Part of it is, of course, thanks to the Israelis themselves.
Yes.
Who willingly broadcast what amounts under international law, and the legal experts are more and more agreeing to that, amounts to war crimes, right?
Yeah.
And they record them and post them themselves. Now, the irony, what I find, is that it was always said the Germans were so secure of their victory that they recorded everything, not realizing or not thinking far ahead that this material that they recorded themselves and which then went into the hands of the Allies was then used against them for evidence, and some of them were hanged based on that. Now we're seeing exactly the same things today, only with the modern media, of course. I watched an Al Jazeera documentary today. They have a collection of 2,000 social media accounts. 2,000 social media accounts, which are full with this type of recorded evidence that sooner or later may be used against Israelis, even top generals.
Yes, yeah, yes. And I must admit, in connection with that this new wave of support for the Palestinian was courageously led by courageous Jewish American leaders and Jewish Canadian leaders and Jewish British leaders and Europeans, etc. I mean, even the Jews themselves who are living in the West couldn't comprehend what these fanatic ultra-nationalists, ultra-rightists, Israelis, I mean, they want to save Israel against its own will because they are as said in literature, they are their own grave diggers. They are digging their own graves because of their fanaticism, because of their state of denial, because they deny the existence of a people that is much more entrenched and rooted in the land of Palestine than themselves. They are all foreigners. He is coming or she's coming from Poland, from Estonia, from Russia, from France, etc. But we were there, and we're still there. And the demographic solid facts say those who live between the river and the sea, that's to say, historical Palestine, is 50-50%. We are still there 50%, and we are, our other 50 are refugees all over the world, like myself.
You just said a number of high-ranking Jews, also in America, who do not support what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And this evangelical, messianic, right-wing government in Israel. Yeah? Now, one of such voices is Emeritus Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. I interviewed him. And he just 2 days ago agreed for a second interview on a very specific topic. But he said something like, and I'm paraphrasing here, it was not for man to create it. The very existence of Israel basically is blasphemy under the Torah, because God was supposed to create Israel, not man.
Yes.
So he's very outspoken. I'm looking forward to talk to him again.
No.
I only highlight this to underline what you just said. There are a number of voices in the Jewish community who are very critical.
Yes.
I have interviewed Dan Perry, who was the head of Associated Press for the Middle East. Now, he supports Israel, but he said something that I found interesting because it's new. It was new to me. Yeah, I want to run it by you. So he said there are thoughts within Israel to partition. He also put the caveat on it. It's not likely to happen. Yeah, but apparently there are thoughts within Israel to think about a partition of Israel, but not between Israelis or Jews and Arabs, but between Israelis and Israelis. What's that? So he says, yeah, there is a part of the Israeli society who finally want to have no longer wars.
Yes, yes, yes.
They don't want the wars. I mean, they're not pro-Arab.
Yeah.
But they don't want any wars anymore.
Yes.
Most of them are the higher educated ones along the coast. Yeah.
Yes.
And then you have the other part of the society who wants this perpetual, never-ending war, which the whole Israeli economy, I mean, people don't realize that. Yeah? Israel without war will be bankrupt. And the same is true for the US, by the way.
Yes.
Those are highly militarized societies. Yeah. And then I run it by somebody from Israel, and this person actually confirmed, yes, again, that was new to me. I didn't, yeah. But apparently these thoughts are there.
Yes, they are. They are.
So I'm mentioning this because there are a number, this is only one fault line, a very tiny one for now, yeah. There are a number of fault lines within the Israeli society that could actually, and again, there's a parallel with the US, that could cause Israel to implode from inside, not from outside.
Yes. You see, the Israeli political society and social society is going through very serious schisms, cleavages. There has always been secular and religious Israelis. But in the last 30 years, 25 years or so, the religious population and consequently the religious political parties grew in power because of their high birth rate. So now
you're referring to the ultra-Orthodox, which get between 7 and 9 children.
Yes, and the Oriental ones, even those who are anti-Zionist among them, but they are religious people, those resided in Jerusalem. And they were the pioneers, the criminals of settling in the West Bank, because they consider the West Bank Judea and Samaria. They want to recreate an unproven story of history. But however, they ended up being in the West Bank and in Jerusalem. They are fanatic, messianic, extremely conservative, and they alienated the liberal, progressive, secular Jews to the degree that thousands of those had to migrate from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv and to the seashore. And so there is like two clear-cut geographical split. Number two, there are, the Russian Jews, there are the African Jews, there are the European Jews, there are the Oriental Jews, etc. Again, that comes up with different cultures, with different attitudes, different orientations. Some are being, especially in the extreme right, the messianic one, they are against democracy. They are for establishing a religious state,
Almost fascist.
which would have to be a fascist. That's why they tend to exhibit undemocratic things. And you've seen the issue that split the Israeli society 50-50 just before 7th of October, when they wanted to change the law so that the supreme Israeli government, which has been a safety valve for Israeli political life, to be surmounted, to be finished.
Dismantled, yeah.
Dismantled. So there are lots of fanatics, lots of schisms, and again, those are divided with the Jewish diaspora, if you want to call it that way, especially those who are living in the U.S., because among the 7, 8, 9, perhaps million Jews who are living in their diaspora, they live in the US, the majority of them, and those have got a historical problem with the religious Jews of Israel about ultra-Orthodox Judaism or reformist Judaism, meaning accepting a Jew. Who's a Jew is a major classical problem question in Israeli life. He has to be of a Jewish mother, but if he is the son of a Jewish father, he's not considered to be a true Jew. So, I mean, that schism has alienated gradually the Jewish community in the US for such a long time, and in some other parts of Europe and in England, UK. So if you add all these things together, plus what I would call the damage that has affected the Israeli dream, the shattered Israeli Zionist dream of the land of honey and milk,
and honey, yeah.
the land of the refuge, the safe, the ultimate safe refuge for the Jews in the world.
It's actually the opposite.
Yeah, and
the
what's
most
happening?
unsafe.
What's happening now? War after war, because these fanatics ruling Israel are leading them from one war to the other. They started with the Palestinians. Now they talk about 7 fronts that they're fighting along. It's a big lie, it's an exaggerated thing. But I mean, who's expanding this? The insistence of not returning an inch of the Palestinian land, the insistence on not returning the Golan Heights, which is Syrian land, the ambition, the appetite, the witted appetite to occupy more of Arab lands, like what's happening in Lebanon now, etc., etc., and their ambition to acquire some of the Jordanian land. I mean, such an attitude results in what? In fanaticism, in more war, etc., to the degree that Israel needs to be saved from itself.
There's one other element that comes in most recently. I mean, I said it before we started recording, right? In this short period of time, it's incredible what all happened in this short period of time that I'm here.
Yeah. Yes.
Most
Exactly.
recently, the attacks, the Iranian attacks, and that's the new element here. Yeah?
Yes.
Also new, huh? The Iranian attacks on Israel. Yeah?
Yeah, it is one of a kind. You know,
it's incredible.
The April one was different, but I mean, this one, missiles. Supersonic missiles.
There's one thing that stuck out for me very briefly. So apparently there was a rocket in the neighborhood of the Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv.
Yes.
It was not hit.
Yes.
It was in the neighborhood.
Yes.
And immediately the global press said Iran is firing at highly densely populated areas in Tel Aviv. Okay, now what has most recently happened? Who bombed the Hezbollah headquarters in the heart of Lebanon, and then claiming Hezbollah is, of course, using the population, using the civil population as human shields.
Yes,
and Israel had no other chance.
Yes, always.
Speaking of which, so
the same in Gaza with Hamas. The same,
So in order to kill one man, I don't know exactly the exact numbers of civilians who died.
Yes.
But apparently they bombed 6 apartment blocks with about 6,000 tons of high explosive to kill one man. So the collateral damage is just staggering.
I mean, look at what happened in Gaza, claiming they want to kill the 24,000 Hamas members. They ended up killing almost 60,000 if you count.
From your experience as a freedom fighter, is it realistic? I mean, seriously, is it realistic that that Israel will succeed in Gaza by eliminating Hamas?
No way of eliminating Hamas. And now it's getting even very difficult to eliminate Hamas rule in Gaza. But to eliminate Hamas, Hamas grew stronger. Since in the last year, Hamas grew stronger. The idea of resistance, Palestinian resistance that Hamas leads, has become the dominating ideology in this part of the world, and not only among Palestinians, in the whole Arab nation and in the whole Islamic nation. And there are even influential thinkers, writers, whatever, in the West who say that is a justified resistance. So, I mean, killing Hamas, Hamas is an idea. And now the Israelis, the fanatic Israelis, the government is pushing things towards becoming like a religious war. When things turn from national war to a religious war, geographic war into a religious war, it can carry with it all kinds of ideological, religious explosions, explosives. It's going to be even worse. But I mean, what can you do with these fanatic, crazy rulers of Israel?
Noam Chomsky told me, and I'm paraphrasing here, they, meaning these messianic extremists in Israel, they will blow up the whole world, but who cares? God is on their side.
Exactly.
Now, there's one element I would like to discuss with you as an academic. Now, it's very easy to kind of blame the West for complicity, which is true, for blaming America. I think 60% of the arms come from America, 30% come from Germany, interestingly, yeah, and then some other countries. We can blame them, they support Israel and so on, but we can also look the other side. So the one thing that completely puzzles me is the fragmentation, starting already with the Palestinians, how fragmented they are, but of course, to a larger extent, the whole Arabic world. Yeah? And this comes back to this play between David and Goliath.
Yes.
So whilst you could argue that, you know, the David-Goliath relationship has changed, where the Palestinians, of course, are now the David, and Israel is the Goliath, taken in the overall context, it's different. Because indeed, there are hundreds of millions of Arabs, and there are, what, 7 million Jews in Israel, ish. Armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons, of course. I mean, that's a different topic. Where I want to go with this is the old Roman doctrine of divide and rule, which was perfected by the British around before, after the Second World War, is effective till today. The Arab world is extremely divided.
Yes.
That has to do with corrupt governments, that has to do with influence, that has many different topics. So again, for you as a academic, how could anyone address this?
I think, you know, it's amazing how the culture in this part of the world plays a role. For example, there was a time when a charismatic Egyptian leader called Jamal Abdel Nasser managed in 2 years, 3 years to unify the Arabs from the Morocco to Oman and from southern Sudan to northern Syria.
Which made him a prime target, of course, of the Americans.
Exactly. And that's why they kept conspiring against him until he's gone. The same with Iraq, with Saddam Hussein.
And to a lesser extent to Libya's Gaddafi.
With Gaddafi, but Gaddafi was not, was not of the caliber of these two. The same with Hafiz Assad, and at one point when he had his dream of unifying all of Syria. So you can...
To give the viewer context, so actually there was an agreement between Israel and, between Egypt and Syria. So at one given time in the period, there were actually one unity.
Well, the Arab United State, the United Arab State, in 1958 till 1961.
It broke.
And take Hassan Nasrallah, who is Lebanese. He is not a leader of a state. He's a Shiite. Was I know, but I mean in the at that time, and he could rally and mobilize thousands and thousands. They label him as terrorist. Okay, they label any freedom fighter as a, and despite that he was a Shiite. And Shiite, you know, the Shia community in the Islamic world is 15%. The others are Sunnis. The Sunnis seem to be the most idle and the pro-Americans. But I'm not talking about the Sunni people. No, the Sunni people were willing and still are to accept the Shi'i leadership, as it was in the case of Hassan Nasrallah. Why? Because he is promising them of a fight against the crimes of Israel. You see, the fanatic Israelis cannot understand that the central issue of the whole Arab nations, of the whole Islamic world, was, still is, and would be the Palestine issue. I mean, to make peace with the Palestinians on 21.5% of the land and give them a small piece of Jerusalem would have, I mean, the Arab world promised them 57 Islamic states would recognize them immediately and would have relationships with them immediately.
You mean with
But
Israel?
as you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier,
Yeah.
they don't want to give an inch back. More so, they want to add more inches to their empire.
Yeah.
Crazy.
If you look at it, it's really, I think you used the correct word, crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's self-destructive.
Yes, self-destructive. But so, Abdel Nasser, who managed to mobilize, Hassan Nasrallah, who managed to mobilize Hamas, which managed to mobilize the major parts of the Arab and Islamic world. I mean, killing Hassan Nasrallah or killing Akram and Haniyeh is not the end of the world. There would be another Haniyeh, there would be another Hassan Nasrallah, there would be another Nasser.
Of course, with what's going on in Gaza right now, I mean, the people who survive, especially the young people who survived, they will not forget.
Yeah, they will not.
Now, I had the privilege to interview your former foreign minister, Dr. Marwan Mouacha, recently.
Dr.
Marwan Mouacha. I'm probably mutilating.
Yeah.
I'm mutilating his name. I
Yeah,
apologize.
Marwan Mouacha.
Yes, he was the former foreign minister of Jordan, former deputy prime minister, a seasoned
Yes,
diplomat.
he's a very good personal friend.
So he said that the hope for the Palestinians must come from or comes from the international community.
Yes.
And then I asked him, okay, given the fact that the international community to this day, more or less, is still led by the West, which is supporting Israel, whom do you mean with, where do you have your greatest hope? With who, which segment, is the international community? And I used the word hope, and he says, I don't have much hope. So I'm asking you the same question. So who could the Palestinians best trust to represent their interests from within the international community, knowing that it's certainly not the West, it's certainly not any of the NATO countries, any one of us, the 16% that is encapsulated under the label West. Who else could help the Palestinians?
You know, I think the transformations that are, I'll come back to a more concrete answer, but I mean, the transformation that we have witnessed in the last 15 years only in the American Democratic Party, for example, is amazing. And if we're talking about 10 years from now, 20 years from now, maybe we would end up with a president like Eisenhower, like what's his name? Anyway, and any American like Bush the father, who would bring Shamir kicking and screaming to Madrid peace conference. All it takes is a solid opposite of Trump, somebody who's forceful enough to take a decision.
So you still hope on America?
I mean, you see, without really changes in America, America is the cancer of the world, and it could be, if it is healed from this cancer, it would be the hope of the world. Remember when I first started saying, I believe in American principles, but I hate their policies. We want somebody who would stop lying to himself and to the world about chemical weapons in Iraq, just to destroy Iraq. A big lie, killing 1 million. So there is a kind of hope coming, I think, from the Democratic Party. There is a greater hope coming from the streets if it evolves into something. But I'm counting really on an American leniency in dealing with Europe vis-a-vis the Arab-Israeli conflict. Look,
you need to explain. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'll explain. You know, Spain is there, Ireland is there, Brussels is there, etc., and they are for a full recognition of a Palestinian state. Who's preventing them? The American administration up till now. There is hardly any resistance. Now we can mention that the Germans are part of the resistance. Had Mrs. Merkel been there, it would have been different, the position of Germany. Remember when they stood up for Trump. So I have hopes in the actual situation in Europe, had it not been for the Americans pushing them backward. I mean, other than that, is, as I said, the birth of a new Arab, the emergence of a new Arab Muslim leader who is capable of mobilizing his country, especially if that happens in Egypt or Iraq or a major Arab country, especially if it is closer to this part of the world, not like in Algeria. It's too far. But
Yemen,
yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, a hope could come also from this implosion in Israel. You know, there was a time when we had Rabin. I'm not saying that Rabin was the ideal man, but I mean, to compare him with what you have now is crazy. You need to have a charismatic, honest, fair Israeli to emerge, also to control this insanity in Israel, and to say, let's go to the table. Let's get the whole Arab and Islamic world in our lap, just to make some concession, just to lose this whetted appetite for more land, for denying people's rights. It could come from Israel as well. I mean, it cannot continue like that.
That's what most people tell me. It cannot continue like that.
Yeah, because now every time we wake up, my wife says, they're stupid. Why don't we have this territorial comprehensive war and let what be? People are getting into a situation of despair to the point that let the whole world explode and stop these killings in Gaza or these killings in Beirut or these killings in the West Bank. I mean, they cannot win a battle, neither in Gaza nor in the West Bank nor in Lebanon. So they start bombing with their American aeroplanes, with their American bombs, with their American, etc., etc.
And there are even voices like Lindsey Graham, I think it was, advocating for tactical nuclear.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, it's getting
Crazy,
crazier and crazier.
crazy.
Yeah. Very briefly, at the end of our interview, and you were very generous with your time.
Thank you.
But very briefly, what are you doing today? Because I know you're very active. Yeah, you have a school. Maybe briefly explain what you're doing in your school.
Yeah, okay. I'm making a living out of that here in the Palestine International Institute.
That's actually, I should have noticed that this is where we are sitting here. We're sitting in your office in the in the Palestine International Institute.
This is an NGO. This is a non-profit, and this is where I spend 90% of my time and energy trying to help our Palestinians living in the occupied territories. And the 10% I spend at the school, because that's my bread and butter, if there is butter in it, you know. So there where I make my living, here where I calm my heart and relax my conscience, and it gives me I mean all these activities because when I'm here and there are no employees, anyway we have 2 employees because after the corona things got more and more limited, hoping that we will catch up again. But I'd sit and write, read and write. I mean, I spend 4 or 5 hours a day reading and writing,
You are
lecturing
writing
and lecturing.
newspaper articles?
Yes. And my articles are very well spread, thanks God. And my lectures are well received. My TV interviews are mushrooming. So I'm happy, I'm satisfied. Intellectually, I'm satisfied. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Dr. Abdul Rahman, thank you so much for your
My
time.
pleasure.
It was
My pleasure.
pleasure was all mine, I guarantee
thank
you.
you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for the interview. And my best to your wife.
Thank you.
And now we present the tour I referenced at the start of this episode.
We are now witness to history. I think that's adequate to describe. Yeah, please tell us.
Yeah, well, I mean, some selected photos, I have plenty of them, but here with late President Arafat and Mr. President Mahmoud Abbas in Gaza, here with the founder and leader of the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. He's the...
Just to be clear, the gentleman on the left, that's you.
Yeah, that's me. Then that's the leader. Here is with Khalid Mish'al, who's the leader of Hamas, and he was one of the founders. He was my student at Kuwait universities. That's where we have friendship. Not too many people would understand friendship in the Palestinian arena. He's a terrorist, you're a terrorist. Easy labeling. Here is with late Mr. Abu Jihad, who was assassinated by the Israelis. He was the second man in Fatah in a cultural activity.
Can you point him out again?
And here, when Sa'ib Uriqat, late Sa'ib Uriqat was young, he was my guest. The same with the Prince of Jerusalem, as we call him, Faisal al-Husseini. This is a picture of the meeting of the executive committee under the leadership of President Abbas.
You mean the PA?
PA, no, PLO.
Sorry, PLO.
And that's me here. Here we have Mr. Kofi Annan and his wife being my guests in Gaza refugee camp, Al-Maghazi refugee camp. This is when the Chinese chairman visited us in Ramallah, and that's me. This is when we visited the Pope in Rome in his office. This is again with Abu Jihad, the second man in Fatah, got assassinated in Tunis. This is with the Lebanese prime minister of who was blown up and who was a personal friend as well. And that's me. That's Abu Ammar, leaders of Fatah. That's with Abu Ammar. And the Commissioner General of UNRWA, he's from Belgium, or he's from Denmark. He was at the time. This is with the Prime Minister of Spain, Prime Minister of Yemen, Foreign Minister of Norway. Here is when the Pope visited Palestine, and he made a speech, and I made a speech in Adhesia refugee camp. His visit was extremely impressive. This is with the ex-crown prince of Jordan, Prince Hassan. This is with the Yemeni president, ex-Yemeni president, and Mr. Chirac, president of France, visiting us in Ramallah. The same with King Hussein visiting us in Ramallah. Carter in Gaza. King of Spain, we were guests at his palace in Spain, Madrid, with the Saudi King Fahd, with Dr. Habash and his wife, the founder of the Arab Nationalist Movement and the PFLP. This is with Queen Rania, this is with Queen Noor, wife of late King Hussein. And this is Mr. Shuman, Khalid Shuman, and that's me. Arafat up there again. And this is the Prime Minister of, ex-Prime Minister of Lebanon, Dr. Al-Hus. And there we have cultural personalities. The most famous Palestinian poet, Mahmoud Darwish. And over there, the second most famous, Samih Al-Qasim. Over there we have here, these are all they are all leaders in the Palestinian field.
We don't have to go one by one, but maybe someone sticks out for you.
You want me to go one by one?
No, we don't have to go one by one, but if someone sticks out for you, who would that be?
That was the second after George Habash, Mr. Ali, Abu Ali, became the Secretary General of the PFLP and was assassinated by the Israelis in Ramallah.
What's this here with the statue?
That's Faisal Husseini again.
No. What's this one with the statue?
Statue. That was when I was a member of a delegation invited by the Peace Academy. This is Maria Theresa Military Academy, when we had a course.
The Austrian.
When we had a course in peacemaking. That was 67.
Okay.
76. And that was Mr. Shafiq Al-Hout. He was a member of the executive committee, one of the prominent Palestinian leaders.
Who is this woman in the first row?
That's my late sister, my late brother, and my late mother.
And all of this in an office at the 6th floor, basically overlooking Amman.
Here we have the Qatari Sheikh Amir, Lebanese president, Iraqi president, Iraqi prime minister. And in here, I think 11, 12 Jordanian prime ministers. This is with the king, Abdullah, present king of Jordan. More Israelis are killed. soldiers. And there was a piece of news on an Iraqi, what do you call it? That Musayyara, that managed to get into Israel.
So whilst we were sitting here, Dr. Rahman had an eye on the developments that's unfolding right under our nose here. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you call this? Not aeroplane, the
Drones.
drones. An Iraqi drone has not been detected by the Israeli defenses,
Yeah.
so it must have
An
hit
Iraqi
somewhere.
drone,
Yeah, an Iraqi drone.
not Iran, Iraq.
No, Iraqi.
Okay. So news as we're sitting here
Yes,
keeps developing.
Look, for example, here, Lebanon, Israeli pictures. That's Sur city in Lebanon. That's northern Palestine or northern Israel, if you want to call it. That's the Israeli base that was hit. So, I mean, pictures. Israeli soldiers fighting, running. 2 Israeli soldiers got killed, 25 got hit, 2 of them seriously wounded.
Good. Dr. Rahman, again, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Thank you.
If this interview got you thinking, questioning, or even arguing with yourself, that's exactly the point. But the conversation doesn't have to end here. Over on my Substack, I take these big ideas and dig even deeper, breaking down the complexities, connecting the dots, and explore what they mean for all of us. Whether it's about today's topic, the next one, or one from the past, my Substack is where the real deep dive happens. So if you're ready for more insights, thought-provoking analysis, and a space to challenge your own perspective, join me there. It's free and the link is in the description below. I can't wait to see what you think.